Now, what is the difference between a conveyancer and a lawyer? Now, what are the things which a first-home buyer should be aware of when they look at the contract?
That's where the cooling off period is really important. That's when you need to do your due diligence and do all your searches. But if you don't do that second inspection, there's no way of proving that that was working as of the date of the contract.
Welcome to Triple O Finance YouTube channel, where we talk about property, loans, finance and all thing in between. I have with me Nick Decenti from Keefe Conveyancing. She is here to tell us about legalities to buy the first property for first home buyers and help first home buyers to navigate all those legalities and avoid headaches as they go along with the journey. So, Nick,
Hi, Nish.
how are you?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it. Your time is very important.
Yes, thank you.
Now, Nick, you have helped hundreds of clients to navigate the complexity of the legal side of buying a property. First thing first, please tell us, what does a conveyancer do?
So, Nish, a conveyancer helps handle the legal and the administrative aspects of transferring property ownership. So if you're looking to buy or to sell your property, you'll be looking to come to a conveyancer or a solicitor to help you complete that process. So we're there to guide you every step of the way.
Now, what is the difference between a conveyancer and a lawyer? Because a lot of people who are migrating from overseas or they are, first home buyers, they don't know what's the difference between conveyancer and a lawyer.
Yep. So good question, Nish. This is one that always gets brought up. So a conveyancer solely every single day, we deal with property transactions, whereas solicitors on the other hand, they deal with various matters, property law, criminal law, and anything of a similar nature. With conveyancers, most conveyancers are part of the AIC, the Australian Institute of Conveyancers. Now, part of that, they issue us fortnightly bulletins, and that keeps us in the loop with any legislative changes. Therefore, if you're looking to buy, it's recommended that you come to a conveyancer solely because we do it every day and we're kept up to date with all the changes.
Nick, so what are the considerations if somebody wants to choose a lawyer?
So basically you need to try and ascertain what it is that you're purchasing. If it's a complex matter such as company title, then my recommendation would be to go to a solicitor, okay, because there is specialised advice that you do need to receive in relation to that, and they'll be the best ones for that. On the other hand, if you're coming off family law proceedings, then you're probably best to go to a solicitor also.
Okay. What's the time frame? When should a first home buyer engage a conveyancer or a lawyer?
Yep, okay. So as soon as you found a property to buy, my recommendation is that you engage in a conveyancer. The real estate agents will normally try and push you to pay your 0.25% and to sign the contract. My advice is to make contact with your conveyancer, get them to have a really quick look through the contract just to make sure there's nothing detrimental in there that will make you not want to proceed with that purchase. So as soon as you found that place to buy, you should be getting in contact with your conveyancer to get them to initially just have a quick look through that contract before you sign the contract and put down your 0.25% deposit.
Okay, so let's break it down. So if I'm the first home buyer and I'm looking for the property, I like the property.
Yep.
And as soon as I like the property, what happens next?
Okay, so you will enter into negotiations with the real estate agent. If your offer is then accepted, like I said, you will contact the conveyancer, get them to review the contract. If you're then happy from then, you're happy with what they have told you, you can then sign that contract and pay the 0.25. From then on, you will be entering into the cooling off period. So in New South Wales, the standard cooling off period is 5 days. I always recommend to clients that when they make their offer, that they make that subject to a 10 business day cooling off period. Okay. Now, by doing that, that then gives us enough time to be able to undertake all the searches, review the contract and order any building, pest or strata reports within that period. So that's the starting point. After everything is basically done, or the due diligence is done, then basically it's up to the client whether they want to proceed with the purchase and exchange contracts unconditionally, and that's when you pay the balance of your 5 or 10% deposit.
Wow, there's so much information packed in
Yeah.
just these sentences. So I'll break it down because some of you would be, you would like to know the details of it. So I'll just break it down.
Yep.
I'll ask those questions, Nick.
Yep.
My apologies. Just say, if I like the property, right? So I will ask for the contract first
Yep.
before paying that 0.25% deposit, right?
Correct.
So I'll get the contract, then I'll send the contract to the conveyancer.
Yes.
And for the contract to be reviewed.
Yes.
And is there a time frame for me, to pay that deposit, 0.25% deposit?
The risk is, Nish, if you don't pay that 0.25% deposit, the agent can go and sell that property to someone else.
Sure.
So time is of the essence. So you really need to get onto your conveyancer quickly just to do that super quick review for you. And then you can enter into the contract and pay your 0.25% deposit.
Okay. Now, that 5 days cooling off period, if say I buy, I signed that contract, I paid 0.25% on Thursday, that's 5 business days, or that's 5 days including the weekends?
No, it's 5 business days, and the first day starts the day after the contract is signed.
Okay. Then 5 business days, but the recommendation is to ask for 10 business days.
Yes.
Now, in terms of financing, so when should a first-home buyer look into getting the finance sorted out?
Before they go shopping. It's as simple as that, Nish. Okay, so
Highly
your first point of contact will be to go to a broker like yourself.
Yes.
Make sure you've got your pre-approval in place, and once you have that pre-approval, that's when you can go out and you can start looking at properties.
Now, say if in 5 business days the finance is not approved,
Yep.
right? What happens then?
Well, hopefully you've got the 10 business days and
Yes.
that's been approved. However, what I always stay on top of it with my clients. So I basically check in with them every second or third day to see whether that unconditional finance has come through. If it has not, and we're on the 9th day, then I will always advise them that we make a request to ask for an extension to the cooling off period.
Okay. And what is the process of applying for the extension, and when should, if that is the case, when should the extension be applied for?
I say as soon as you become aware that you will not get it back in time.
Okay.
Okay, I say don't drag it out, because being honest is going to be the best.
So say if, and this happens sometimes, the bank will say, okay, the approval will be coming probably, just on the 10th day or
Yep.
on the 9th day, and the approval doesn't come through.
Yep.
So is it the case? So on the, say if we've got 10 days cooling off period, and on 9th day the application should be made to the other party that we will be seeking, irrespective of whether the approval has come through or bank has said the approval is coming through.
Yes.
Is that recommended?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Once the contract has exchanged, it's gone unconditional, what is the next step?
So the next step from there basically is, look, most of the work and the due diligence is done within the cooling off period. Okay, so thereafter, basically what we as conveyancers need to do is make sure everything is in order for settlement. So we will order certificates, like a water certificate, council certificate. We'll get the contract stamped and assessed for stamp duty exemption. And once all that returns, that's when we can do what's called a settlement statement sheet. That will tell our client what the total amount is due on settlement. Now, why it's important to have your unconditional loan approval before that is to make sure that you will have the funds to settle.
And in terms of the settlement sheet, when you prepare that settlement sheet, so you will go through the numbers, you will look at what are the fees and charges,
Yep.
and you will look at what the funding is provided by the bank.
Yep.
And once you know that, and any shortfall, you will let the client know that this is the shortfall, right?
Yes.
So if there is any discrepancy between the valuation, the bank valuation, and what the contract has been signed for, then you will crunch those numbers and you will let the client know that they have to fork out whatever the amount is. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So I try and do that process as soon as the contracts are exchanged unconditionally. So if the client doesn't have the funds, they need to go and obtain them. Then they've got as much notice as possible to know that that's the amount that they need to come up with.
What a great insight, guys. It is such an important information. You need to know this before you go out and buy the property. Nick, just going towards, if you look at the contract,
Yep.
right? Now, what are the things which a first-home buyer should be aware of when they look at the contract? Of course, they'll be engaging you or conveyancing services, any professional to look at the contract thoroughly. So what are the things which they should be aware of, even before signing the contract?
Yep, so mainly they need to be aware of the special conditions. So every solicitor or conveyancer has their own set of special conditions, okay? So there could be clauses in there, and I'll give you an example. If there is a unapproved structure that's been built on the land, there could be a clause in there disclosing that that's the case and that they're buying that property as is. And they won't be able to rescind, terminate the contract or claim any kind of compensation against the vendor in relation to that. So the special conditions are really important to understand what they are. And obviously the title search. So the second schedule of the title search shows your notifications, if there's any easements, any positive covenants on the property, and that's something they also need to be aware of, particularly if they're looking to develop that land, build on that land. They need to understand what it comes with that land.
Have you come across any instances where the structural improvements have not been entered in the contract in special conditions?
Yes, plenty of times, Nish.
So what happens then?
Plenty of times. Well, that's where the cooling off period is really important. That's when you need to do your due diligence and do all your searches. So I've had matters, Nish, where the property was only built 3 years ago and there's no occupation certificate and it hasn't been disclosed.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really important to do your checks through council to make sure that if it is a newer property, that there is an occupation.
I'm just trying to get my head around this, because when you receive a document, and document speaks for itself,
Yep.
you are analysing the contract,
Yep.
and you are doing all the searches and whatnot.
Yep.
On the other hand, the client or the first-home buyer has gone into the property and seen the property. So is there something like the buyer goes into the property, look at the property in their own way, right, from their own eyes,
Yep.
and there will be some biases. They like the property, the emotions are high,
Yes.
they want the property, right? So they might not be aware of any structure, and they might think that the structure is part of that build.
Yep.
And how would they identify, and what are these some of structures which you can identify?
Good question, Nish. So I always ask my clients when they first contact me and they're buying the property, they've obviously seen it. Does anything stand out to them? Can they tell that it has been a major renovation, or if a structure doesn't look like it was part of the original property? Okay, now what I also do is, the first thing that I do when clients are buying, I jump online, I have a look at the ad. Okay, because real estate agents will put in the ad that's been completely renovated, it's had a new garage built, or whatever the case may be. That's all nice, but from my point of view, that's ringing alarm bells, and I know that I then need to go and check whether all that has been approved.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And what are the consequences of not doing that due diligence?
Well, if you don't, and obviously the client, you proceed with the contract and the client purchases the property. If you have an unapproved structure on the land, you risk council coming knocking on your door and serving you with an order.
Either to demolish it?
Yeah, to an upgrade order or to demolish it.
So additional cost.
Much more additional cost.
Okay. Before the customer's contract goes unconditional, when is the building and pest inspection needs to be done?
Straight away. So as soon as a contract is exchanged, I get on to ordering the building and pest and strata reports straight away, because they do take time, and it's really important to get those and give the client enough time to go through those reports.
Okay, tell me why that is important.
It's very important niche. When you're buying a property, that's one of the biggest investments of your life. So there's many building reports that we get back which will raise concerns. Particularly what's seeing more and more each time is structural problems, okay? Now, if I get a building report and I've reviewed it and I can see that some kind of structural issues there, I always advise my client to call the building inspector and to have a chat with them, okay? Now, in addition to that, I always advise my client to contact a structural engineer to have that property assessed, because the last thing that you want to do is buy that property and work out that you have to spend $100,000 later fixing the property.
Absolutely. What I've seen sometimes is that when you receive a building report, there are certain instances where the first home buyer or investors, they will look at the building report and there are red flags in that. However, they'll totally ignore it.
Yes, they do. That's because they're emotionally invested in the property, not thinking logically as first home buyers. They've seen the property, they've fallen in love with it, and they just want it.
And that emotional bias cloud the judgment to just see those red flags, which might cost them a lot, which either they can negotiate the property, is that right? They can negotiate the property, or they can get the vendor to fix it before buying the property, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. So that's where I come in. So, I mean, I do get a lot of first home buyers who are emotional. I obviously give them a letter summarising what I found in that building report, but I also get onto the phone with them, the issue, because having that personal contact can sometimes get through to them more. So again, if there are major structural concerns, I always tell them, go and get an engineer's report. Once that comes back, depending on what it says, I always advise them to then go and contact a builder or whoever it is they need to contact to see what that is going to cost in repairing that. Once they've got that figure, I will then advise them to ask for a price reduction. So how that is done is I will send an email off to the vendor, basically advising that the client has done a building report which has raised some concerns, and then they've gone and got an engineer's report, and stemming from that they've gotten some quotes as to what it would cost to repair the structural damage, and I would ask for that reduction in price. Now, whether or not they agree to that,
yeah, of course, that's totally up to them.
Totally up to them.
And it depends what the market is. If the market is hot, there are other buyers lined up.
Yes.
They're not worried about price reduction and whatnot.
Yeah, that's right, they're not.
But you don't want to be falling in that trap.
Yeah.
Where you are overpaying for something which is, clearly a red flag, and, put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
Now,
and on that niche, what buyers need to always be aware of is building inspectors are not engineers, okay? They will put the basics in the report, and I had this recently where a client was purchasing a property and it had comments in the building report as to some structural damage to the property. When the client contacted the building inspector, basically the building inspector said that is normal for a property of that age. I pushed my client, he got the structural report, and he rescinded the contract within the cooling off period, simply because stemming from that and from his research from that, it was going to cost him around $50,000 to fix those structural issues. It was a lot bigger than it just being because of the age of the property.
That's a very important point, where people make a comment on the seriousness of the report, and it's costs you a lot to get it fixed. So how do first home buyer navigate that? Is it that they should get a second opinion, or get a second opinion from another building inspector, which is going to cost them again $500, $600, whatever it is?
Yeah, it's not so much their building inspectors, because what you need to remember, they're not qualified engineers. Okay, so their job is to point things out, and then it's up to the buyer what they want to do with that information. It's my job, and I do this, I push my clients. If I see comments in there that doesn't sit right, I tell them and I advise them to go and get an engineer's opinion on that, because it's really important.
So would it be advisable to get engineer's report in the first instance, or?
Look, only if something's raised of a concern in the building report or if the client has seen something themselves.
Okay.
Generally, you'll be able to see, like, if there's major cracks in the walls, then you can tell there's some kind of movement in the property. Then on that situation, you'd want to get an engineer's report.
And what about, because I've seen water retention or the plumbing issues within the building are a major issue and it's a major cost. Speaking to a lot of builders, because it's hidden, you can't see it when you go and look at the property. So how do you navigate that?
Commonly we'll order a building and pest report. Now, the building reports, they don't test stormwater pipes or sewer pipes to see if there's any blockages or not. So it's always advisable that if the client wants that and they're happy to pay for it, to engage in a plumber to do those checks, because that could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Firstly, you have to hire somebody to come in, and if the experience is a lot of people, if they have not identified the issue first up, they'll firstly just try to fix it. Well, I'm not saying that everybody does it, but they'll try to fix it, and then after fixing that issue, it's a consistent time, your money, your energy, everything is spent on something which you can totally avoid first up.
Yeah, you can totally avoid it. It'll cost you a couple of $100s to get a plumber out, put their cameras down the pipes and to see if there's any major issues, because the building reports, they don't go into that much details. They go into simple details. And I'll give you an example, like the water pressure seems to be adequate in the building. If there's a leak on the tap, they'll say, it's noted that there's a leak on the hot water tap and so forth.
That's interesting. So is it also the case that when you go as a first-home buyer to buy the property, you just run all the taps first up to see if there's any blockage or not? Just keep it running for 5-10 minutes once they've decided that they want to buy for the property, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, that's a very basic, I haven't seen it, I haven't done it myself, but
I have myself, Nish. Yes, I have. On my first property that I bought, I turned on every single light switch and I read every single tap to make sure it was working. And just good. On that, Nish, we'll go back to the cooling off period, because clients aren't aware of that. I always advise clients to go back and do a second inspection within the cooling off period and to do those things, to test the air conditioners, to test all the taps, make sure everything is working. Test all the appliances, the cooktop, the range hood, the stove, make sure it's all working.
That's an interesting point which you've raised. I know from our previous discussion about the inclusions in the contract. Just tell us about that.
Yep, so your inclusions are obviously like if there's a dishwasher, range hood, oven and cooktop. Now, if you do, as I advise my clients, do that second inspection, okay? And I'm going to tell you about a matter that I had. I advised my client to do that second inspection just to test the appliances. The client did it within the cooling off period, and obviously the agent knew that they did because I have to give them access. The client tested everything, it worked. We came 2 days before settlement when they did their final inspection. The client went back with the same agent to check everything and found that the range hood wasn't working. I then wrote to the vendor solicitors and said my client, and I made a point of it, they did a second inspection just to test the appliances and everything was in working order. They went to do their final inspection and the range hood wasn't working. We asked for a $500 adjustment on settlement and we got that. But if you don't do that second inspection, there's no way of proving that that was working as of the date of the contract.
That's your 1 hour of just going in, taking time for inspection. That's $500 saved. That's $500 per hour you've earned.
Pretty much, yes.
So what are the pitfalls which the first home buyers should avoid when they're going through their property journey?
The big one is buying emotionally, okay? Now, first home buyers, they go out, they see a property, they fall in love with it, they want to buy it, they don't care what cost, okay? But what they really need to consider is at what price. So it's really important that they do their due diligence. They have a look at the properties in that market, in that area. Even if they're not interested in buying that other property, go and look at it because you'll be able to see what that is listed for and what you can get for that money compared to the one that you're looking at buying. Same thing, look at the surrounding areas. Have a look at what the properties are selling for, okay? Now, agents can be pushy, okay? But what we need to remember is they work for the vendor, not for the purchaser.
That's a great insight. And I'm not saying every agent is pushy, and but it's very important to know who is on your team,
Yes.
who is on your team.
Yes.
Because if you look at it, it's a game. Who is working for which team is a key. And as you said, that agent is working for the vendor.
Yep.
And I'll give you an example. It's a very interesting point which you've raised, and it's very important for the listeners to understand this. So there's real estate agent who sells the property on behalf of the vendor or the seller who wants to sell the property. They are working in the best interest of that vendor to get the highest price for the vendor. You as a property buyer, you want to buy the property at the lowest price. Now, what happens is sometimes you are so much in love with the property, you lose objectivity. When I say you lose objectivity, you don't look at the market price, what's happening in the marketplace. And the example which I want to share with you is one of our clients wants to buy this property. The valuation of the property came low, and the surrounding property in the area were about $50,000 less, which was selling with the same size, same type of property. If I look at the inclusions, almost similar inclusions. I have gone through the property report provided by the valuer. I have gone extensively into the report to see exactly what other properties they have compared. It was $50,000 lower price than the contract price. Now, the client wants to buy that property. Even the property price was $50,000 more, the client was reluctant to negotiate the price. Reason being, he likes the property, and the agent was saying that it's a good buy. You must buy this property, otherwise we've got people lined up who want to buy the property. That might be the case. There might be people who are lined up to buy the property. However, the important aspect is whether you can afford that property. That $50,000 which is going out of your pocket, are you firstly able to afford that? Secondly, is that value for your purchase? If you're buying $700,000, $800,000 property, $50,000 if you are just forking out, you are losing that money straight up.
Yeah,
your
you are.
opportunity cost for that property, you can look in the other area. And sometimes that's where the judgment is clouded. And I was in the same boat. I'm not saying how many different. When I bought my first property, I was so focused on the property, I was ignoring all the red flags because I want that property. However, I
was in the same, sorry to interrupt you, I was in the same boat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we all have that experience,
Yeah.
but you learn from your experience.
You do.
And you don't have to fall just to get that experience. But if somebody has already fallen, then you can learn from that experience.
Yeah.
The problem which I identified was that instead of negotiating the price with the vendor, the client was thinking that the real estate agent, and I'm not saying real estate agent was doing his job. It's so important that he does his job because that's what his role is. But we, as a buyer, you have to understand what is the role of the person who you are dealing with. So there was no objective opinion which he's listening to or even considering. The other thing which I've realized is when you have spent your time, your money, your research, you've researched the area and whatnot, sometimes it's the time which you have spent. You don't want to spend your time again to do that research.
Yep.
Right? Which is your bias come into play.
Yep.
That, and you want to get it over and done with.
Yes. I've seen that quite a lot.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why people just, emotionally buy the properties and whatnot. And it's important for any first home buyer going into the property market, just have that objective view.
Yeah.
That, if there are red flags, if there are any issues, you just address them.
Yep.
And negotiate them and listen to the professionals who are working for you. It's so important, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And on that niche, if the buyers feel like, they can't take that emotional out of the purchase, then what I would recommend is, and we've spoken about this before, get a buyer's agent.
Get a buyer's agent.
Because that's going to cost you far less than the $50,000 that you've overspent on the property.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. And you will have, extensive research, because buyer's agent do due diligence and exactly find the properties which suit you.
Yep. They do all the legwork.
They do all the legwork, and they will give you an objective opinion.
Yep.
Without any biases in terms of, and they'll be acting in your best interest.
Yep.
So without any biases, emotional bias or any other bias come into play, because they are looking at objectivity and they'll say, okay, this is what you got to buy.
Yep, and they'll also do negotiating on your behalf as well.
Yeah, of course. So, the cost might be covered just by negotiation.
Yes.
Okay, so what are the emotional bias and what are the other pitfalls which you think the first-home buyers should be aware of?
They need to make time. Okay, they need to make time, particularly when they're buying, to make sure they're on top of everything and getting everything done, to do their research, to read the reports when they're available.
That's a big one.
Yeah, the building and pest reports. When I get them, Nish, like I said earlier, I send them a report flagging what's in there, particularly with strata reports. Strata reports can be over 100 pages long. They generally are. I will highlight the main things and I'll send it to my clients. I always say in my letter, this is just a summary of what's in the strata report. You need to go and read it all. And I always tell them, I know it's long, I know it's lengthy, but you need to set the time aside to do it. And half the time they turn around and say, but I've read your letter. And I say, that's nice. I'm glad you've read my letter, but now you need to go and read the full report. And if you have any questions, you need to ask me of those. It's really important because it's really important that they understand what they're buying. It's really important.
That's interesting. Keeping on top of everything, so that entails that if any information is required by any of the stakeholders, they have to respond to that promptly, because that will expedite the process, isn't it?
Yeah, they will, absolutely, particularly that unconditional loan approval. That's what we need to come back the absolute quickest.
Absolutely, totally. Because we have instances where we request something and it takes 1 or 2 days to receive the documents, and that process delays the approval process, because banks have their own timeline. So once the document is submitted to the bank, some banks pick up documents after 2 days.
Yes, they do.
Because they've got so many applications to work on. That process takes time. So it is so important to just get on the front foot and just get things done, because from the time you sign the contract,
time is of essence.
Time is of essence. It's so important.
Yep.
What else?
I don't think just on that, Nish, I don't think a lot of people realise that a contract is legally binding.
It is.
It doesn't work on your time.
Absolutely.
That's why you need to get on top of it.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't realise that. They just think that's okay. We'll get there. No.
And what are the okay, this is an important point. What are the consequences? Because I think when people know the consequences of the contract not being exchanged properly, or it has been null and void, or it has been breached, what are the consequences of breach of the contract?
Well, it depends on the contract terms, Nish, but worst case scenario, and I mean worst case scenario, you can end up in the Supreme Court being sued for damages because you haven't complied with the contract terms.
And what the damages entail, is that basically pay for the whole property price, or?
Yeah, it depends on what the breach is. That's what it really comes down to. But yeah, look, you could lose your deposit and walk away with nothing. It really does depend on what that breach is.
And plus legal costs.
And legal costs as well.
And if it goes to Supreme Court, the legal costs can be quite high.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly again, back to the finance. If you can't complete a contract just because your finance has not come through, that's not a reason why not to complete the contract. You will be sued.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Just shed some light in terms of buying in auction and private treaty.
So
what's the difference, and how a buyer should go? My apologies. Please.
That's right. So the main difference is that with an auction, there is no cooling off period. Okay, so that means that all that due diligence needs to be done beforehand. Your unconditional loan approval needs to come through, not pre-approval, unconditional approval. You need to have done all your searches, get the building and pest report done before you go to auction, because once that hammer falls at auction, if you are the successful buyer, contracts have been exchanged unconditionally and you will not be able to rescind the contract.
Now tell me this, there are times when people have raised the issue about the cost of doing the pest and building inspection before going into the auction.
Yeah.
Again, it depends whether they win the auction or not. So what do you want to tell them about the building and pest inspection getting done or not?
Small price to pay.
Small price to pay?
Small price to pay. If you're going to an auction, Nish, and you have registered as a bidder, you are invested in that. You are not going to make $1 million investment or $2 million investment and save $500 on a building and pest report. So even though you may not be successful at that auction, you don't know. You may be successful, and you want to know that the property that you are buying is structurally sound.
Oh, absolutely. Strata reports, you said it could be up to 100 pages and whatnot. Let's just briefly talk about if somebody wants to buy a unit, right? Because unit is different from houses, townhouses are different, and you have duplexes and whatnot.
Yeah.
So let's go to strata. So how does the strata buying process, is it the same? How does that work?
The process is very similar, but what first home buyers or any buyers need to realise is that it's not like buying a house, okay? Now, if you're looking to buy a strata, you need to acquaint yourself with what that entails. So you should be learning about what strata is, how does the scheme operate. You should be understanding levies, strata levies or strata special levies as well. Now, particularly what a lot of people don't realise is if you're buying into a strata property and you want to do renovations, you can't just go and do them like you would in a house. You need to seek, depending on what the renovation is, you need to seek approval from the owner's corporation to do those renovations, and that will also come at a cost.
Now, in terms of the contract, so is the contract for units different from your normal contract?
So the main difference is when you're buying in strata, it will have what's called bylaws, okay? Bylaws is a document that basically sets out the rules as to how the scheme is run, okay, and what you need to comply with. So I'll just give you an example. A common bylaw that we see generally is that you can't hang washing on the balcony that can be seen from the street.
That's interesting. I think just strata laws understanding and levies and whatnot, that would be another podcast looking at it, because it's so detailed and there's so many clauses and so many ins and out of it, in terms of the building, in terms of what you can do and what you can't do, what are the obligations of the owner of the property and whatnot. So we'll do that.
Yep,
right?
that'll be a good one.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. All right, guys, just keep an eye out on that video, which we'll be posting on YouTube.
Yep.
For time being now, so for first home buyers, any final tips which you want to give it to them?
Main one is, Nish, do your due diligence. That's really, really important. Don't buy emotionally. If you feel like you can't do that, get the buyer's agent involved.
Fantastic. And get your loans approved, get your documents sorted out, inspected. Any contract which you sign, just get some legal advice, speak to the conveyancer or your lawyer, know who's on your team. And just engage. You have to have a good team behind you when you are in this journey to buy this for your first property, because it's the key to have right people on your team. What we're going to do is, guys, we're going to provide a link to a checklist which you can go through. You can download from the link, which is free. Just download the checklist, which will give you some information in terms of what you need to do as you go along. That will be first home buyer checklist. And also, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, make comments to if you want us to make similar type of videos, what issues which you want us to bring to light, and do our research, and we'll bring those issues to you guys and provide as much information as we can. Thank you very much, Nick, for conveyancing needs. Go to Key Conveyancing, speak to Nick. She would look into everything which will save you thousands of dollars. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Nish.